다 인데 남한테 게 상물로야 삼지 쉬어다 잡지도 다 윤자리
First, I would like to offer all of you my greetings.
델리아 도마 예 공시 공시 쉬어이
And I'd also like to apologize for having to postpone this week's teachings by one day.
다들 샴리아 소주 뭐뭐 소리야 예 미세기
Now, before I begin the actual teaching, there are a few words I would like to say. A few days ago, I heard that there was a bit of a COVID outbreak at the Jutta Monastery in Dharamsala. When I heard this, I got very worried, but I didn't know the actual situation in detail. Even though I wanted to say something about it, I didn't know what to say. So now the situation is that many Sangha members were infected with the illness, but there is probably only one who is seriously ill. So it seems that most of the Sangha members are in good health, and there are probably many who did not show any symptoms. The best thing is that among all of the elders of the Sangha, there weren't any difficulties with the illness. And so in any case, the situation was not so bad. Now, for myself, a week or two after I arrived in India, after fleeing Tibet, I went to Jutta Monastery. Now, at that time, there were only a few monks of the Jutta Monastery there. Most had yet to move. And at first, I only planned to stay there 1 or 2 months, but in the end, I ended up staying there permanently. And I lived there for 18 or 19 years, and during all those many years, they let me do whatever I want for the whole time, inside and outside the entire monastery. They let me make new doorways, put in new windows in places where there weren't, make holes in walls, remove walls entirely, and so forth. There was never any complaint about what I want to do, and they treated all me very well. And so it wasn't just me; it was also many workers in our Tsupa Ladrang. And it's like we had taken over the top floor and the ground floor of their temple. But all of the precious Kempo of the monastery and the stewards and all of the monasteries were happy to let us do whatever they want, took great pains to ask us what else they could do for us. Now, when I arrived in India, I had many difficulties. And it even got to a point where I wondered whether I had done the right thing in fleeing from Tibet to India. And so was that sort of a situation distinction, but I thought that I never made a mistake in terms of where I stood. And I thought it really worked out well to be able to stay at the Jutta Monastery. And that's how I felt about it, and my sister also thought so. And someday everyone who'd come with me from Tibet and everyone related to the Ladrang said the same thing. And so really, in actual fact, they're extremely kind and extremely kind to us. Even if I'd stayed at a Kaiju monastery, I think it would have been difficult to be treated well, to just say, straightforward. For example, sometimes in the winter I would stay in Bodh Gaya for a few months, and people would say a thing or two. But all the time that I stayed in Jutta, no one said even a single word, made a single word of complaint. And so I think that the monastery, it's a great monastery, had a really very good attitude, similar than many others. So many people thought it must have been a hard situation, a difficult place. But from my own point of view, I don't think that it was actually a bad situation or a difficult place, and there are many reasons for this. And the reason is, the older monks from Jutta Monastery would say to us that when they came from Tibet in 1959, they went through Bhutan. And the 16th Karmapa gave them aid and assistance, different, unlike many other people. And so the older monks all say this. And so they're saying that there's a special connection already. And also, before I left Tibet, I had a dream. And in the dream, I dreamt that I was walking near the wheel of Dharma and the deers that are on the roof of the present Jutta monastery, and on the roof of the monastery. And I also had dreamt of the area in front of the monastery where the hostel buildings are now. And so I had a lot of, so I saw a lot of it in my dreams. Also, before I fled, I went down to Lhasa, and I thought, well, I may not be able to see those again. So I went to, so they had a chance to go to Ramoche Monastery. I'd never been to Ramoche before. And so that's the first time that I went to Ramoche. And so when I look at the good signs like this one, I think that there must have been some particular reason why I had to spend such a long time in Jutta Monastery. I don't think that it was a pointless or meaningless and that I stayed there because of having difficulties. I don't think that at all. And so for these reasons, and so understanding this and the guidance, I think that we all need to make the prayers that everyone at the Jutta monastery may that the COVID outbreak at the monastery may subside, and that none of the monastery may all recover without any ill effects. And so actually, when the outbreak began, the monastery spent 6 months with a very strict lockdown, and there were not any difficulties at all. But now in India in general, people are relaxing about it, and there have been fewer people illness, and so the restrictions have been relaxed, and everyone's more relaxed about it. They're paying less attention to it, and so everyone thinks that actually there's no reason to be discussed. So this situation probably happened because of that. However, because it's not actually a real difficulty or not a real danger, I think everyone please react to that. Now, I'd also like to. I thought I should speak a little bit about Tsongkhapa now that I've been speaking about the Jutta monastery, and you will understand the reason why later. So generally, when you talk about the two monasteries of the Great Secret Mantra, the two greatest or major monasteries are the Jutta monastery and the Jubei monastery. So these two monasteries are really very important for Buddhist teachings in general, and in particular for the teachings of Lord Tsongkhapa. And generally, in the Gelugpa lineage, they have three main idams, the Guhya Samaja, Chaksasamvara, and Vajrabhairava. And the one of these whom Tsongkhapa considered most important was probably Guhya Samaja. For that reason, it is said that if there is Guhya Samaja, then that is the there are the Gelugpa teachings, and if there are not, there are no Gelugpa teachings. In Jamyang Chuje's liberation story of Tsongkhapa says, on a throne studded with many jewels, the omniscient Bhutan Rinchen Drup, who gave him the root tantra of Guhya Samaja and said to him, be the master of this and supplicate the glorious Guru. He gave him the volume with the mantra and mudra and blessed him on the top of his head. He realized the points of mixing power from the mantra and the tantra, the pitha instructions of Nubal Gowan, and supplicate the glossary. In brief, this describes how he developed certainty that Marpa's instructions on mixing and po are the meaning of the tantra and the pitha instructions of Nagarjuna's difficulties. Likewise, also, Drupal Kandasanu was someone who a citation of Drupal Kunyak, and he was someone who would say no matter what he thought, whatever came to his mind. So one time, he met some mountain retreatants who lived a very simple life. And they said, all those people who, all those philosophers spend so much time worrying about the words and they don't understand the actual meaning. And the best thing is that if the best thing is on the outside you understand philosophy, and on the inside you understand the actual points of Tantra. The best are the Kajipas. And Gelugpa said to them, no, it's not that. And so what he immediately said to them is, you don't understand, so it's better for you to shut your traps and stay there. And he said a lot of different things to them, but among them, he said this about the Gelugpas. The Gelugpas that have the tantras that Marpa brought from India, including Guhya Samaja, Chaksamvada, and Bhairava, Hevajra, and their practice. They meditate on the path of the unified creation and completion, and they have the points of the point in prana and mind entering the central channel. It's the unmistaken practice in the Gelugpa school, he said. And he also spoke about the Sankhya school, and he said, you folks, this won't fit in your mind, so you better just shut up and sit there, is what he said. And so Drupal Kunlek was, in our Tibetan histories, is someone who just said without any restraint whatever came to his mind, and so I thought I would share this with you. But next, I thought I should give some quotations from Tsongkhapa's own disciples. And I thought that this would help us in terms of learning how to think. There's also Tsongkhapa's disciple, Chengon Sunam Jasm. Now, he was from the Padmakudra. He said in his question and answer string of Vaidurya, he said that the Lord Tsongkhapa not only never refuted the Kagyu tenets, he also said that this can be proven in his own tradition. And so what he's saying that in terms of the view, Je Tsongkhapa is that Tsongkhapa liked the consequentialist view, and among that, he especially liked Chandrakirti. Now, he also said that Lord Marpa was also a consequentialist or prasangika. And the proof of this is saying that in Marpa's song, he says, on the banks of the river Ganges in the east, due to the kindness of the great Guru Maitreya, I realized the ground, the non-arising dharmataya, the mind blazed in emptiness. And so that he's saying that, so that so Maitreya taught the teaching of the non-arising dharmata to Marpa, and this is the meaning of the Chakrasamvara. And also, in another of Altanjit Khepe Dorje, another student of disciple, he says that there's no Vajra master greater than Vajra, who upholds the teachings of, who teaches the teachings of Nagarjuna and Aryadeva without any adornment. Also, there are others who said that there's no greater Vajra master than Marpa, and he said this over and over again. Generally, when we think about the consequentialist tradition, there are two traditions, one presenting all phenomena as mere existence and saying that they become true, and some that say that they do not become true. So the question is the presentations of the relative truth. And so as a support from this, Tsongkhapa said that, as a report of this, that Milarepa said things that are similar things. And the way that they are similar is that in Milarepa Sangha, Milarepa said, in accordance with all your beginner's thoughts, the omniscient Buddha said that everything exists. So this speeches about how conventionally everything exists. Then, in terms of the ultimate truth, there is not even a Buddha, and so forth. So that is the ultimate truth, the ultimate teaching on how things ultimately do not exist. The existent appears things and non-existent impotence are inseparable in essence on one flavor. And so ultimately, there's not even the words for samsara and relative and ultimate phenomena don't exist at all. But relatively, they are inseparable, and so this way they're presented as just meaning words. And so then when we there's the middle way teaching of the ultimate emptiness, and the teaching that according to the realists that things exist relatively, and so the joining these two as one is a particular view of the Kagyu school, as Tsongkhapa said. And he also said that there is a teaching. He said that Gampopa said of a quotation for Gampopa that when you realize emptiness, you must be more detailed about independence. And Tsongkhapa said this is a really important point. And also he said that Tsongkhapa also said that Patmodrupa was a really authoritative being. And he also said that Gyawa Yungaba was a yogi who had the ultimate view of the perfection stage, and praised him very highly. And he said that the views of the Mahamudras do not present the discriminating prajna, and so they're excellent. And so these are the actual words of Mikinojita. So sometimes later masters said that the Mahamudra was a Hashang view and it was a nihilistic view, but Tsongkhapa himself did not say this. He said it was excellent. And so this master he was actually heard as saying this. Likewise, when he taught the Tantra at that time in Tibet, Sangwatupa, Chakasamvara, and Vajrabhairava were the most important. And so Tsongkhapa emphasized, and he said that the Guya Samaji, the Marpa tradition was the best tradition on this, and he made things that were not so clear in the tradition even more clear than they had been before. And he said that for many students, the pith instructions of Marpa were absolutely necessary to develop certainty, and so therefore he made Marpa traditions the most important. Likewise, with the Chakrasamvara, he made Naropa's tradition the most important, and filled that in with teachings from other Indian masters. With Hevajra, although there's no great practice of the Vajra in his practice, but he primarily considered the Ngot tradition of that to be most important. And when teaching the completion stage of the Tantra, he said that the explanation of that gets the clearest presentation of all the the crucial points of the Father and Mother Tantras is the 6 yogas of Naropa. And so in brief, he's saying that there are different terminologies, but the actual teaching on the view, meditation, and conduct are basically the same in Tsongkhapa's presentation and in the Kagyu. There are differences in terminologies, but they're just different ways of explaining, and there's no great difference in meaning. Now, so there's really no instance where Tsongkhapa was no reason to say that Tsongkhapa was displeased with the Kajupa teachings, that he didn't like them and he refuted them for that reason. The reason we can say this is that Tsongkhapa also refuted some Indian masters, and so this is not a sign that he disliked them. In fact, he also said that Tsongkhapa said that the precious Kaju lineage was in accord with him, and he said we should be delighted with it. Likewise, also is Kachupa, a great direct disciple of Tsongkhapa. He was one of the four main Kachupa, or the masters of the 10 disciples, the 10 disciplines. Now, some people say that there are four of these masters, but whether you say there are four of them or one, Basar Kachupa is one of these. And in the 5th volume of Tsongkhapa's collected works, there's notes on Guhismaya by Basar Kachupa. And I received a teaching, an old text of his on an explanation of the Kaju teachings, and said that the teachings of all the Buddha's compassion and wisdom was condensed in once and brought into the world of the Bet by the great master of into Tibet by the Kaju tradition, and the one who is teaching these and disturbing them is my own Lama Tsongkhapa. And so he should never say that he did anything to harm the Kaju teachings. And so that he used a lot of scriptures and reasoning to show that Tsongkhapa never did anything to harm the Kaju teachings, but instead supported them and propagated them. And generally, when he's talking about we have question about whether Tsongkhapa's view was whether his analysis had gone to the end or not, or whether it fit with whether it fit with the teachings of the earlier Tibetan masters. And there are many. And there are people who, but this is something that we need to really examine. Whether this is the actual situation or not, we need to examine ourselves. For example, Tsongkhapa's own the Golden Garland of Explanation said that I have not described the nature-free of elaborations of the 8 streams as Nagarjuna's disciples did, because the words alone would scare people. And so when we look at this, if we infer from this passage, we said that even from his own time, he had his own particular presentation of the middle way, even at that time. Not only that, Tsongkhapa's own direct disciple, Gulo Tsawa Shinupal, wrote in his, it's written in his life story that Je Rinpoche appeared in Tibet like a Buddha appearing in this world. When Tsongkhapa went to Sojong and other rituals, he was such a magnificent that all the mountains actually started to shake. And so he had that feeling, is what he said. Likewise, in a text called The Great Medicine of Amrita, that even Vajrapani would not be able to understand the qualities of Tsongkhapa. So there's no higher praise than you can give of the qualities of Tsongkhapa. However, but in this said that the followers did not pay so much attention to that, and didn't pay attention to his qualities. Also, one time Tsongkhapa himself, when he was speaking about the definitive and the expedient meaning, what he said is that is saying that there is also a way of presenting the definitive and expedient meaning that does not contradict with this explanation in the sublime continuum. And so in this way, so Tsongkhapa was such a great person. So at that time, people would teach him that so they should have. The people should have given him a mandala and asked him to explain this further, but no one did, and so he did not. And so Tsongkhapa didn't explain. So if we look at Gulo Tsawa's teachings, we say that at the time that some of Tsongkhapa students paid attention to some of his teachings, but not to other aspects of them. So I think that's probably what happened later when we look at the Golden Garland of Precious Explanations or Jamyang Shepa's teachings. These are considered highly in the Gomang monastery and some of the Amdo teachings. But most of the other Gelugpa students, followers, have not really paid much attention to these sections. But in any case, and so for this reason, and there are many controversies about the Nyingma tradition and so forth that happened. Also, in Tsongkhapa's instructions on the 6 yogas, there are instructions about the simultaneous individuals and the gradual individuals. And so Tsongkhapa said that the simultaneous or the individuals are those who have to be those people who have already achieved a high level of realization. And Tsongkhapa also said in some notes that it is not necessary to give the 4 empowerments of the Va, secret, prajna, and wisdom empowerments to the greatest of students. And so he said things such as this as well. So, for example, in the old Tibetan way of thinking, in the world Tibetan tradition, so there's something that's different than others. They would really like it, and they'd really build it up. If there's something that was the same, they would sort of put it at the side. They kind of hide it, and they say because it's not so special. They say they wouldn't pay much attention to it. For example, if we look at the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the teachings of the foundation, the greater vehicles, and the tantras, and the 18 different teachings, and there are many different types of views, the middle way and mind only and so forth. And so I think this is a special feature of how it's a wonderful activity that can fulfill the needs of all the different students. And so when you have such a great scholar and master as Tsongkhapa, the fact that he has many different ways of teaching for different teachings is a sign that he has a really profound way of thinking. So some of his students say some of his followers say that one type of his teachings is logical and is tenable, and another is not, and they really spend a lot of time saying that this is the particular teaching and so forth. But I think that this has actually become a bit of an impediment to Tsongkhapa's teachings spreading widely among all the lineages. And so that is the way I think about this sometimes. And so today I sort of felt like I had to say something about that. But in any case, I think it's important for us to look at everything from a very broad speaking. And the more we can think about things from all perspectives, and we can see that Tsongkhapa is not some of just a sectarian philosophical school or a sectarian leader. It is not. Seeing that he's actually kind to had a great effect on the teachings in general and for all Tibetan lineages. Sometimes when we give explanations, we don't know how to explain things. We are not skillful about how we explain. And so sometimes it's difficult for us to explain things in ways that everyone can understand clearly. So that is enough on that right now. So next, I thought I would like to speak about the 6th of the deeds. The other day I spoke about the 6th of the good deeds from the autobiographical versus the good deeds. And there's a little bit more to say about this. This is... So first of all, I thought I would remind you of the root verse for the 6th good deed. So this is it. This is the root text of the 6th good deed. If I read it once. Besides the true protector, the three jewels, no other refuge gave me confidence. The jewels know all joys and woes. I had not a whit of any dependence or hope in anyone else. I think of this as one of my good deeds. Now, from the time that Lord Mikyo Dorje was young, he remembered death and impermanence and the suffering of samsara so keenly, or perhaps too keenly, that it gave him insomnia. And if we express it in comments, he was always like complaining about it or whining about it. It's like he was saying, it's terrible, it's not good. So what Mikyo Dorje himself said was that when we think about the meaning of impermanence, the most helpful thing for us to think is that the meaning of impermanence is momentariness. And momentariness means that things do not endure from one instant to the next. And what's infinite, things that appearance don't need any other condition to perish. The moment that they arise, they naturally perish, and so that there's no other there's no other need for anything else. And so and also the text talk about the meaning of impermanence as actually being nothingness. And so because of this, he developed certainty in the explanation in the texts on logic about the meaning of impermanence. And he also said, the reason why I, or Mikyo Dorje, saw that the actions for this life and particular plans in this life have no meaning at all, and the feeling or understanding I had from that, and the reason why I had this understanding, I had a feeling for how I got that, was reading the liberation stories of Lord Milarepa and Lord Godzampa. We've all read the life story of Milarepa. And so Godzampa is like Lorepa and Godzampa within our Kagyu Linja are the two people who really represent feeling revulsion for samsara. And so he is one of these two. Now he says, now no matter what friend I part from, I don't feel any poignancy in relation to this life for even an instant, Mikyo Dorje said. It's basically, once you have no attachment to this life, when you part from your dear friends and relatives, such as when they die, he has no attachment to them at all. And so no matter whom I associate with in order to have a good time or good situation in this life, they only think he only thought that it was meaningless. And so when there's a nice place to stay or a nice house or a nice place to be, he always felt like that it was like a room in a hotel that he was renting for a few days. He's always had the feeling that it's a place that he would not stay for forever. And so he continually had this feeling of an impermanence. He's saying, I'm staying in place. He had no thought of this being my permanent place. I'm staying, and this is my room. He never had that feeling at all, he said. So in brief, Mikyo Dorje always spoke only about world weariness and the wish for liberation. And because of this, what many people said is that Mikyo Dorje, someone is really small-minded. He's really flighty, He's just not at all a stable person. He was always changing his mind. And so people, complained about him like this. They said about this behind his back, but Mikyo Dorje himself, what he said about this is, what I think is that what all of you who talk like this should go to where you're staying or to your bed and point your finger at your own heart and turn your thoughts inside and look. You should, point your finger inside and think about and turn your thought inwards and think. Do you have any idea when you are going to die? Do you know for certain? And when you die, once you've died, when you die, we have a little bit of hope within us, and we put our hopes on that. But even when we put our hopes on that, but when we die, but that little bit of virtue is not of enough a sort to determine where we're going to be born or not. There's not enough of a foundation or a basis. So no matter what sort of birth that we were born in, whatever new place we're born in, whatever new companions we have, and whether we have new possessions that will be unattractive, you won't even hear the words, the three jewels. You will spend your entire life in misdeeds and suffering, and if you're born in such a body, then what will you do then? You need to think about that. I'm not going to tell you. You need to think about it for yourselves. When you think about this, you couldn't even dare think about it. It's a you should just be terrified of this, and you should think about it. Shouldn't you be thinking, what am I going to do? You should be thinking that. And so for that reason, you must give up on this lifetime. And in order to do this, whether your parents make a request of you, or your relatives, or powerful friends, and whether they share their opinions with you, or whether your retinue and students make requests of you, or no matter what good or bad things other people say, you should never think about it. You should say, I'm not going to rely on anything. There's no point in doing worldly things to placate your parents, or doing worldly things to placate your relatives or powerful friends. You shouldn't think that you have to act the way they want, otherwise they won't like it. You should think, and you should always think, do what you want, whatever happens, whatever comes. And so I'll do what you wrote. And whatever happens to me, let that happen. And whatever comes to me, come. And you should have the real decisive feeling of this. You shouldn't give the rope around your neck to any other sentient beings. You should be, or the rope to your nose to any other sentient being. You should have your own freedom. And so that is that. And so that is. Now I've spoken about the sixth good deed in general. There's a lot that could be said about it. But because of the time, we won't speak about it so much. So next I'll speak about the seventh good deed. Now I have to speak about it quite a bit. Otherwise, we just don't have enough time, right? Now the second, the seventh is the good deed is the first of the second main section. When you talk about the nature of the biography, there are two topics: the preliminaries, how to enter the Dharma, and the main part, how we practice the paths of the three types of individuals. So the first one, the how to enter the Dharma, has been explained in full. So we've got the second, the main part, how we practice the paths of the three types of individuals. And if we divide that into subtopics, there's how we practice the path of the lesser individual, how we practice the path of the middling individual, and how we practice the path of the greater individuals. In brief, there are the three different subtopics. And so now I'll speak about the first of these, how I practice the path of the lesser individual. Now the root text reads, once I knew that all suffering that occurs is the result of my own wrongs, I could not complete in full unvirtuous acts with preparation, deed, and aftermath. I have not completed an unvirtuous act in this life. I think of this as one of my good deeds. So this is the first point in the second main section. So among the 33 good deeds, this is the seventh. So now we will take a break, and when we come back, I will give the explanation of the seventh good deed. Now, as I was saying before, so here in this passage, when we're speaking about the path of the lesser individual, and the previous verse where we're talking about the going for refuge, they have a really strong connection, a very profound connection. So basically, from ancient times until today, most people who have said that they're Buddhist will say with their mouths, the three jewels know all joys and sorrows, there's no place to place hopes in, and I go for refuge. But when it comes to the actual meaning, there are few who understand what it actually means to say the three jewels. When you say like the jewel of the Buddha, it means someone who thinks only about the other sentient beings' welfare, and who, in order to benefit other sentient beings, has given up all the faults and they have accomplished all the qualities that there are. That is the type of individual we call a Buddha. And so, therefore, that sort of a Buddha could only say the straightforward truth to others. And there's no way at all they could tell a lie. So now, what is it that the Buddha taught, if we talk about it like straightforwardly, honestly? Is that everything that is by nature, karma and afflictions, will deceive you and harm you. And if we can't accumulate the antidotes to karma and afflictions, that is virtue, that'll benefit us. In brief, he taught the presentation of karmic cause and result. But we don't really believe from the bottom of our heart that this teaching of the Buddha is true. We say we go for refuge to the Buddha, but we don't believe it from our hearts. We don't believe from our hearts, but in external appearance, we pretend to be Buddhist, and we pretend that we know refuge, but in actual practice, we take it as a truth that all the results of happiness depend upon subduing empties and nurturing friends. So by subduing and nurturing friends, we're able to bring ourselves happiness and avoid suffering. That is what we think is what's true. We don't even need to speak about all sentient beings. Even Buddhists don't even get along with each other. And there are some we will help and some we won't associate with. And in addition to that, we harm as much as we can. In particular, we monastics, monks and nuns. What we do is, our fault is, as we say, this is my school, that's their school. And we have sectarian views and divide into factions. And we say that the view, meditation, and conduct of other philosophical schools are wrong. They're bad. We said that they're completely mistaken. We say that the only ones who are not mistaken are us. When the lamas or the other people who hold another philosophical tradition do something that's even slightly unsimilar, then in the short term, and we try as much as we can to say to broadcast everywhere to as many friends and as people as we can that they've done this horrible thing. We consider people who harm other schools as much as they can, who support their own schools as much as they can, to people who are loyal to the teachings, to people who serve the teachings, who have pure intentions. So we praise them, heap a mountain of praise on them. In brief, we spend our day and night busy with the intentions and actions of obliterating the lives of those who are not on our own side, and destroying all the possessions and resources. This is all we think about. This is all that occupies in our mind. And then we get busy with it. And that uses up our entire human lives. And in order to accomplish those purposes, what we do is we take whatever worldly god or naga or spirit is the most cruel and vicious and is the most evil inside as our main refuge, and we say you are the most compassionate, and we invoke their activity. So instead of the gurus and the three jewels, we choose to place our hopes in powerful people and wealthy sponsors. We say that instead of looking to the three jewels and the gurus, we look for the wealthy sponsors. We look for powerful people. And in order for just a little bit of luck or faith to go slightly in our favor, we place our hopes in some worldly god and will make any oblation or propitiate them in any way we can. We don't entrust ourselves to the three jewels. We have no hopes to do so. So, in our mouth, we say we go for refuge to the three jewels, but in deep inside, we go for refuge to the ghosts, gods, and humans with arrogance and deceitful intentions. But what we say still is we still say, "Oh, I'm Buddhist. I go for refuge. I go for refuge to the Buddha. I go for refuge to the Dharma. I go for refuge to the Sangha." And that's we sit there doing this. And so this is how we've done things from ancient times until the present. So what did Mikyo Dorje himself do? No matter what action he did, whether major or minor, Mikyo Dorje only devoted himself wholeheartedly, entirely to the gurus and the three jewels. He never did any of the divinations or shamanism or gathering wealth or so forth or astrology. If they were the parts of those that are if they were in accord with Dharmic teachings, he would do a little bit of them, but not those parts that contradict the teachings of the teachings. And also, when anything that harmed him, harmed Mikyo Dorje himself, he said he wouldn't blame other people saying it's their action or what they've done. Instead, he would say that this only happened because of his previous karma. It's all the result of past actions. And so he recognized that there was solely the result of past actions. And he recognized this and did what he... And so he developed some understanding and confidence that this is because of karmic result, and then the pleasant results that occur are the kindness of the source of the jewels and the gurus and the three jewels. And so for this reason, he remembered that he said it was certain that everything good that happens because of the guru and the three jewels, and so he never had anything, never thought about anything else, and this is what he always thought about. And so this is said, other than supplicating the three jewels fervently, we shouldn't place hopes in any other refuge, or entrust ourselves, or place our hopes in anyone else. Now, when we talk about praying fervently to the three jewels, the understanding that Mikyo Dorje had of this is that our actions of body, speech, and mind must not contradict the teachings of the Buddhas and the gurus and the three jewels. In order to do this, and we have to have good behavior with the body, speech, and mind. Often we think of it as like we're having some sort of a sad expression, and that we're doing things external with body, speech, and mind. But that is not how we should understand praying. That is not what we should understand praying fervently to mean. Now, there was a time when Mikyo Dorje had many recurrent illnesses, and during that time, what Mikyo Dorje, what he probably said himself was, what action did I do that such an illness as this has to occur? And so when he said that, there was a Lama named Ayya Lama. Ayya Lama, this Lama. What he said, Your Holiness is a Buddha. You're a Nirmanakaya of a Buddha, so please don't say that. If you speak like that, then something's going to happen to us. And so please don't complain like that, he said. And so Mikhail Dorje said to him, Lama, there is no other truth than karmic cause and effect. In this world, there's no truth other than karmic cause and effect. So, if I hadn't accumulated bad actions in the past, how could this happen? So what are you saying? So this is what Mikhail Dorje said. And also one time, he was at Tsari Tashijong. So this is a Tashijong, it's in the region of Tsari. When he went to this place, he felt a bit unwell. And when he was unwell, the reason why I have to feel so unwell physically is because of eating the food offered in faith in the kingdom. And because you've eaten so much food offered by all the people from all the different regions of Tenri. It's basically because of eating food that was given as offerings. And so no matter whatever illness or misfortune occurred, he said that all the blame for all of it came down to himself. So many people, when we think about other people, when we think about people who is to blame for problems, we think that it's always someone else. Especially in a free country, we always think that it's the president did this, the ministers did this, sometimes we say we talk about it on a high level, we say it's the president, or think about if it's the local leaders. But we're always looking for someone outside to blame. However, but in the actual situation, there are quite a few that do come from other people. But there are quite a few that happen because we do not follow through on our actions, or because we make mistakes. But we don't recognize that. But we always look to see if we can find someone who we can blame, someone we can point out and say, this is the one to blame. And so for that reason, the Kagyu master of the past said, drive all blames into one. So you have to point your finger at yourself. Whatever faults you have you need to bring out whatever faults you have. That is the most important thing. If you're not able to recognize your own faults, then no matter how much you complain about other people, you're never going to prove yourself. For example, if you have an illness, that illness is in your own body. And if you cannot reveal what that illness is, no matter how much you say, you can't say, oh, the doctor didn't help, the medicine helped. It doesn't help, right? So that's the way of thinking about it. Likewise, Mikhail Dorje himself said, whenever he had any, and received any great to ill or wealth or acclaim, what he would say is, this didn't happen because I have such great compassion or such power. It's not that I know what I'm doing. It has happened only because of the kindness of glorious Dusum Khyentse and his disciples. That is why we have full stomachs and have become famous. For example, because of the kindness of the protector Pangmadrupa, all of the holders of the Dharma lineage and the Telpa monastery, his family lineage and servants and followers received so much worldly wealth and bounty. So it is the same. So if the good things occurred, then it is always others' kindness. It's not thinking, oh, I know what I'm doing, I'm great. That's not how we should think of it. Likewise, when under things happen to such as followers, such as the students in monasteries and so forth, such as being attacked by other people or losing money and possessions or being falsely accused, you would say, this is the nature of things that this has occurred. It's the nature of karmic cause and effect. It was preceded by a cause. And so since we don't act according to the Dharma, then the Dharma practitioners will punish us. So look at this. And that's what he would say. He would never say, yes, it is impossible that could happen, but how is it that it happened? What occurred? He never thought about it this way or spoke in this way either.
너나 소수의 초래
In brief,
나서 말하면 소수의 초 미규도 지기 다 제스 소수의 초래야 말리관
so no matter what misfortune happened to his own side, that is, the people who his own followers, in a worldly way, he would never, his students would never see him worrying about thinking what went wrong.
하나 신기 아니 미규도 지기 우치리게 베기 샵지 소리게 비냐
Likewise, with the attendants who were around the Mikyo Dorje, when they had any misfortune or any really inauspicious event in this, or auspicious event occur, he'd say, "Now that is good. Let everything what happens be." And so they'd immediately feel really be very carefree and comfortable. So they go to Mikyo Dorje. With they'd have such great worries, and they go see Mikyo Dorje. When you tell them about the suffering, the Mikyo Dorje said, "Oh, it's no problem. It's good. No matter what, let whatever happens, just be as it is." And immediately people feel comfortable, and all the previous discomfort just becomes really, really pleasant and comfortable. So even the students, the way Mikyo Dorje spoke and the way his example and how he spoke, when they remembered that, his students would immediately, all of their sufferings and sorrows would be relieved. So in brief, Mikyo Dorje himself had such great confidence in the gurus and the three jewels. And because of the interdependence of that, then everyone else who placed their hopes in him and asked him for protection also had few fears and little suffering. They also naturally gained happiness and bounty. They naturally had great trust in and longing for the three jewels. And not only that, often it would happen that people would pray to Mikyo Dorje, recite his name, and then he would appear in their dreams and they'd be like liberated from illness or and suffering, or liberated from duns and dun spirits or obstructors. Also, there are people whom the doctors would say that they're going to certainly die. It's definite they're going to die. And someone else would carry them on their back to see Mikyo Dorje to receive blessings. And the moment that they met him, they would immediately perk up. They'd have like a really strong feeling. And because of this, and all the illness would just naturally go away. And when they leave, they would be able to go walking on their own 2 feet. Also, some students, when they would get sick, they would then at the daybreak, when they were sick, they'd go to sleep, and at night they'd dream at daybreak that they felt like his foot on the top of their on the top of his head, and they had this feeling. It was like a feel like of warmth on the top of their head, and they'd feel pleasure and comfort in their body and mind. And then when they woke up, the warmth was still would not have left the top of their head, and they would be naturally cured of their illness. And so these things happened many times. So now first Mikyo Dorje stayed in Kham, and then he went to Kongpo. And when he got from the time that he arrived in Kongpo, the crops in Kongpo would be good, and there would be no danger of illness or famine nearby where he was staying. And so all of the provisions and necessities like tea and clothing and fabric would naturally just arrive from afar. And also one year there were many earthquakes in different areas of Tibet. There were 7 earthquakes in the region of Kongpo. But everyone believed that it was because of the Mikyo Dorje, blessing of Mikyo Dorje, that there was no damage and that no one was injured in the earthquakes. Likewise, there was also a forest fire in Pomboro, which is in Kham, and the camp was in that area. And so there's a huge forest fire, and the flames reached the edge of the encampment. But then the fire went out on its own. And so this happened that the fire just died on its own. And so Mikyo Dorje was able to help these people who had faith in him and who asked him for help. And how did he do this? It wasn't because Mikyo Dorje had such a high view, or he had such a sharp focus of samadhi, or because he had the great power of mantra that he was able to repulse these or prevent these prevent these illnesses. Mikyo Dorje didn't see it like this and didn't accept that it was like that. What he himself said is that if you do not give up the 10 virtues and practice the 10 virtues, you cannot prevent the suffering and the 3 slums. There's no way that you achieve the pleasures the God and human realms. So this is talking about it in terms of the lesser type of individual. If we talk about it, I don't know if we can really call this the lesser type of individual, but we'll just say the lesser type of individual. Likewise, if you're not liberated from attachment to the desire realms and higher realms and so forth, and do not gain the bliss of jhana and absorption, you will not achieve the pleasure and bounty of the higher realms. And likewise, until you realize the faults of the samsara cause and result, the truths of suffering and urgent, and recognize that there are problems and faults, and realize that there is no self that experiences those, and then eliminate the affliction. There's no way you can say that you've eliminated the afflictions of the 9 levels and achieved liberation from the suffering of samsara. You cannot say you've achieved nirvana. And if you do not recognize that all sentient beings are your parents and gather the virtue of the 6 transcendences, there's no way that you can prevent the suffering of becoming in peace and achieve the happiness of admissions. So in brief, these days, there are people who do not practice what they should do and what should not do properly, and say that and we take that the people who harm defeat their enemies and help their friends, and we say that and we understand that the people who are teaching us what to do, and we think that everlasting protection comes from defeating enemies and helping friends. And so when they think in this way, these are like they've come under the Mara's. People who think this have come under the Mara's power, and the 3 jewels will not be able to protect them, just as a shoot will not grow from the ashes of a burnt seed. So if we believe, if we do not believe the teachings of the Buddha, and we instead find some other refuge that teaches a wrong way of what teaches what we should do and should not do in a wrong way, then there's no way that the 3 jewels will be able to help us. Likewise, there's also one occasion some of the Karmapa students were coming from Kongpo. And they came to some Gelugpa monasteries at Po Chutumpa. And so they didn't. And the monasteries didn't let them in. And so they must have harmed them in some way. And when they harmed them, then at that point, in Kongpo, in Kongpo there were a lot of the Karmapas communities and monasteries, and they all got together, and they assembled an army. And they were ready to go to war. And now the war didn't go well. And when the war didn't go, they summoned even more people, and said they were going to destroy all the Gelugpa monasteries in the region of Kongpo. And when they said that, then Mikyo Dorje said, what he said is,
다 겐덴베 공부 충충질이야. 내가 세베 있는 얘기 깨제봐도 해매봐 인식.
so that if you harm even the smallest of Gelugpa monastery, it's the same as cutting my neck. And so he said, so they had, so they left the Gelugpa monastery as completely untouched and listened to what he said. In addition to the Kamsang teachings, there are people who are very partisan Kamachids came to him and said, it's really horrible that you said that. And saying you aren't thinking about the teachings of the benefit of the teachings. And some of them said, and so Your Holiness has now destroyed the teachings. And so people came to him and said this, but what Mikyo Dorje said at that time is, no matter whatever bad things people might say or bad things happen because of the situation, I'll take them upon myself. Now, the point of whether I've destroyed the teachings or not comes down to this point right now. And so in this crisis situation, we need to see, do we have the antidotes in our being? Or do we have virtue in our being or not? We need to look at that ourselves. It doesn't help us to pretend that we have virtue in the antidotes normally. And so he said this very very forcefully to them. And the Kamsang people said, how can he say that? The Gelugpas have really been giving us trouble, and we need to go and get revenge on them, but that didn't work out. Now it's terrible. And so many people criticized Mikyo Dorje at that time. But there was Yangdre Drumpa Kunsangwa. He was a very good Kagyu practitioner, a good retreatant. And what he said is, probably him and a few other people who praised him, what he said was, so now we should, now that the Karmapa has really shown the signs of a practice, he said that he used to leave handprints and footprints. Yeah, those are probably signs of accomplishment. But the real sign of accomplishment is that in response to a harm, he is actually bringing benefit. And so this is the praise that Yari Tumpa Kunsangwa gave him. So there are only a couple of people who praised Mikyo Dorje. Most people criticized him and said that he was not manly enough. So when the armies would go, then the monasteries had heard about Mikyo Dorje's things. So later at Songkotang, when the Tse Gontang would send people to the Garchen and to go to visit the Gelugpa monastery, send people to see Mikyo Dorje and make confessions to him. And what they said was, last year we had the event of having a little bit of a war, and Mikyo Dorje and Your Holiness was very kind in protecting us, and so we now have the faith of feeling that you are Avalokiteshvara. So now if we wanted to wage war on you, we could do it, but because we think that your activities are those of Avalokiteshvara, so we're saying that you are a guru. We're saying that the deeds of this guru are the same as of Avalokiteshvara, and so for that reason we've come to make this confession to you. And one of the better lamas said at this point, and when the guru says, "Please give me the lung of a wrathful Guru Rinpoche practice." And so you Gelugpa, so you Gelugpa are coming to me, the Karmapa, to ask for Nyingma Dharma. If you're going to ask for that, isn't that just laughable? And so for that reason, from the time of the seventh Karmapa, during the time of during the time of the seventh Karmapa, there were some conflict between the seventh Karmapa. Now, there wasn't any reason for there to be conflict between the Gelugpa and the Kagyu. If you look at it from today, the way we say it is that they're just misunderstand it. People not thinking about it properly. And because people didn't have ways to directly resolve their response. And so the events would go around and they'd speak about them with many people, and people would misunderstand them. And because of that, there was some disharmony between the Kagyu lineage, the Karmapa, and the Gelugpas. But the main reason for there to be the misunderstandings between the Gelugpa and the Karmapa was the monastery in Lhasa. And so Mikyo Dorje just completely gave up and left it alone. And for that reason, during the time of Mikyo Dorje, there was a lot of harmony between the Kagyu and the Gelugpa tradition. In particular, in the Kongpo region, the Kagyu and Gelugpa monasteries in the region of Kongpo got along very well. And so this is another excellent example of his activity. But at that time, most of the constant people had kind of very, if they had acted on the really hard-headed views of most of the Kagyu followers, then this would not have happened. But Mikyo Dorje acted differently. And so that is how the situation was then. And so I think that is enough for today. And as I said the other day, I said I would speak about the Great Encampment. Yeah, when I said that, but it's actually not so easy to speak about that. I looked at a few documents yesterday. And I kind of got halfway through them, but finding a real point to speak about is hard to find. Like I had the similar I had a similar talk when speaking about during the time of when speaking about Deshin Shekpa. There's so much information. There's so many documents, and think, should I speak about this? Should I speak about that? Trying to find which one I should do. But if I want to explain them all, there'd be no way that I could, and it'd also become boring. And so that is a difficulty that I had. And so the Garchen is also a similar topic, or the Great Encampment is also a similar topic, because there's so many situations related to it. So the Great Encampment was an organization that functioned at the time of many of the Karmapa. So it is also related to the 8th Karmapa. It is not just something that is related only to the life of Mikyo Dorje. And so I think I probably should be able to speak about it tomorrow, but I can't promise that 100% that I will be able to, but I'll try my best.